The anime begins with a struggle between Zet and Alpha, two opposing superheroes. They are Jin Kanzaki, a young guy who can transform into a superhuman known as Zet, and Kuga Amaji, a young man with a strong sense of justice who fights using technology as Alpha. The fates of these two men and those around them interweave as they strive to protect humanity and kill terrible abominations known as players, which are ironically the creations of Kuga's grandfather, Mitsugai Amaji, who created the Amaji Corporation. The scenario depicts the mood of a fight between two monsters known as players. The fight was seen by wealthy individuals who turned it into a betting venue. The players were creatures created with the goal of creating flawless artificial humans. The project evolved beyond simply constructing the ideal artificial person. It became a sport for the rich men to wager on them, gambling as they fought other monsters. That night, the players became aware and slaughtered everyone in sight. As a result, many players believe that humans have mistreated them and that they are vastly superior and deserve more. The scene then shifts to two scientists debating their invention, a baby boy named Zet. One of these scientists, Goro Kanzaki, desired nothing more for Zet than for him to grow up as a normal human. So he seized Zet and fled. Several years later, after the people had grown accustomed to the hero known as Alphas, who had become popular through television entertainment shows, the true danger was aimed at them. A man was killed in a public location in a lightning-fast incident. The police have yet to discover any information concerning the perpetrators identified. They suspected, however, that the homicides were linked to 4 other occurrences that shared some of the same characteristics, and all victims died. In another scene, Goro Kanzaki, who is now penniless and homeless, is seen with Zet, a 10-year-old boy. He gives the boy the name Jin and raises him as his grandson. He educates Jin to always do the right thing and have a strong sense of justice. As a result, Jin always assumed that saving others was his job. Jin watched a woman being intimidated by a band of criminals who intended to rob her one day. When she was desperate, he offered to assist her fight the goons in exchange for a 10,000 yen bounty. She then consented to his demands without hesitation. Even though he is a tiny lad with ragged clothes, he has a strong fighting ability and can defeat the band of thugs on his own. When Jin was ready to collect his payment, his companions interrupted him and begged him to leave. Kuga Agami, a kid his age, and Konoha, his younger sister, are his closest buddies. They come from wealthy households as opposed to Jin, who is penniless and homeless. Nonetheless, they enjoyed playing with Jin. Kuga was inspired by the anime hero Alphas to have a strong sense of justice. As a result, he wishes to be a law enforcement who combats crime. He also chastised Jin for expecting something in return for assisting others. In fact, a great hero should serve others without hesitation. Jin, on the other hand, claimed he was compelled to ask for something in return since he needed money. Jin, sensing Konoha's embarrassment over her bandaged wrist, informed her that his hand was also wrapped. Jin then removed the bandage and revealed a ring in his hand. He stated that his grandfather had asked him to keep the presence of the ring a secret from everyone, but he showed it to Kuga and Konoha because they were his friends. Jin ran across the woman he was assisting again as he was ready to return home, and this time he gave her 10,000 yen and a business card. Akimi Kawakami is her name. She informed him he may contact her at any time if he needed assistance. He thanked her and dashed out to see his grandfather. Jin was surprised to learn that his neighbors had been killed when he arrived. He dashed over to his grandfather, who appeared to be dying in a pool of his own blood as a result of an attack that had occurred seconds earlier. He became terrified and attempted to seek assistance from a neighboring doctor, but he was just turned down because he lacked funds. Jin subsequently attempted to call Kuga, but his smartphone was confiscated and destroyed by his father, who banned his son from making friends with a poor youngster like Jin. In the midst of his sadness, Jin remembered the business card that had been given to him and contacted Akemi. When Akemi saw his grandfather was gravely injured, he hastened to take him to the hospital for quick medical attention. However, his grandfather died in the end. Guru and the people that live there are suspected of being the victims of a recent serial homicide. The officers then performed autopsies on their bodies. Meanwhile, Akemi offers Jin to stay at her home until social services locate him a suitable foster home. She, who has a son his age, feels terrible for him because he has lost his family. In another scene, Kuga's grandfather, Mitsugai Amaji, the founder of the Amaji Corporation, is seen examining one of his experiments when his men approach and notify him that they have located Goro Kanzaki. Mitsugai and Goro were colleagues who conducted an effort to build the best artificial humans. However, the experiment failed and transformed the patients into savage monsters known as the Players. Mitsugai then inquires as to Zet's whereabouts. Goro had taken this experimental subject away several years ago. He was aware of a youngster named Jin, who'll be assumed to be his grandson. On their way home after shopping one night, Akemi and Jin were confronted by a man who attacked her till she was gravely hurt. The man in question was none other than the player, the mastermind behind the recent string of murders. Jin, unable to control his rage after the guy hurt her, wakens his hidden power as Zet and effortlessly defeats the player. Jin, on the other hand, lost consciousness soon after unleashing his power. Soon later, a man named Seiji Hitani appears and appears to be interested in him. Seiji is an evil monster, similar to the players, but of a higher rank. They adhere to their organization's regulations and avoid unnecessary killing. As an organization, they have authority over the Prime Minister of Japan. Aside from him, a creature known as the Sweeper emerges to eliminate the defective players who have broken the laws and caused chaos. Jin awakens in the hospital the next day, relieved that Akemi's life has been saved. Several years later, Kuga, now an adult, watches television news reports about fires that have recently occurred often and killed many lives. The fire was started by a player who elected to disregard evil's laws in order to do anything he pleased, including killing humanity. Despite his lack of superpowers, Kuga, who still aspires to be a law enforcement, is determined to find the mastermind behind the fire. In another scene, Konoha, who is now in high school, is shown with her mother providing food to the impoverished and homeless, and then she was reunited with Jin, who had vanished after his grandfather's death. She knew him because of the ring lodged in his wrist. He still recognizes and thanks her for always assisting the underprivileged. Konoha then told her older brother Kuga about Jin. Knowing that Jin is still alive and well, he is relieved and hopes to meet Jin. At other news, Jin is confronting the player who is responsible for a fire at an apartment complex. Kuga and his crew, including Konoha, come to apprehend the perpetrator of the fire. When Kuga walked inside, he instead encountered Jin, who was on her way to rescue a mother and her 2 children, who were still trapped in the chamber. Kuga prioritized the victim's rescue mission as the fire spread throughout the structure. Meanwhile, Jin is back in battle with the player, who continues to attack him while ranting about his disdain for humanity. Jin unlocks the Zet power within him, surprising the player and dubbing him the Charisma. He can easily defeat the player and extinguish the fire by tearing down the structure after transforming into Zet. However, much like before, he slumped unconscious after using Zet's power because his body was depleted. Mitsugai, who had been watching Jin because he was Zet, led him to an Amaji Corporation covert facility. Mitsugai uses Akemi as bait to resurrect Zet's strength in his body. Jin grew enraged upon seeing her, who had become a prisoner of the player and eventually unleashed the power of Zet. The player who became Jin's opponent this time turned out to be a Zet clone who is still being studied by scientists. Zet's red clone then repeatedly attacked him, feeling triumphant when he went down and did not respond to his blows. However, Jin eventually defeated Zet's red clone with a single light hit. Although he had not fully awakened Zet's might, his current strength had exceeded Mitsugai's expectations. However, the cells in Jin's body began to degenerate, so Mitsugai sought Goro's assistance to solve the situation. Mitsugai set his men to bring Goro's body to the Amaji Corporation's facility some time ago. Following that, his brain was connected to a computer in order to gather unknown information about Zet or Jin. He informed them they had to assassinate the player, who was still close to Jin. Mitsugai is likewise perplexed as to who the player is, as Zet's clone has perished. One of the scientists, a man named Kishimoto, informs him that the woman who resembles Akemi is a player. As a result, they had to kill her in order for Jin to revert to his human form. After that, one of Mitsugai's men went forward and shot the woman. Jin eventually defeated Zet's might, reverted to human form, and then dropped unconscious. When Jin eventually awoke, he was furious at Mitsugai's treatment of his foster mother. Mitsugai, on the other hand, disregards this and transports him to the Forgotten Zone, an underground facility where the players used to live. Mitsugai displays the Ring of Exposures, which corresponds to Angel's ring in Jin's body. Mitsugai then describes how the players, who were formerly humans, came to be. The Ring of Exposures might transform them into vicious, bloodthirsty monsters known as the players through a condition known as regression. He does not deny that he is the one who developed the players and turned the monster bouts into a betting arena in order to collect funds to perfect his research. However, things spiral out of control, so Mitsugai enlists Goro's assistance in developing the Hunter, who will be responsible with exterminating the monsters, none other than Zet. Mitsugai also informs to Jin that Goro is Jin's father, and he refuses to turn Jin into a Zet. As a result, Goro is frantic to remove him from the facility and raise him as a normal person so that he can enjoy a normal life. However, Jin could not avoid his fate, so Mitsugai requested him to assist in the fight against the monsters. Mitsugai then invites Jin out and demonstrates that Akemi is still alive and healthy. However, Mitsugai prevents him from meeting Akemi since her safety will be jeopardized if he is near her. He was heartbroken and frustrated because he could no longer live with his adored foster mother. Nonetheless, Jin will go to whatever length, including becoming a Zet and obtaining his perfect form to protect Akemi and everyone else from the players who wish to destroy humanity. He does, however, impose several conditions on Mitsugai, one of which is to remove Akemi's scar and attempt anything so that she can live with her kid, who has been living with her ex-husband. Police discovered 6 remains that had dissolved like sand 2 years later. Sayama, a senior police officer, believes the corpse was killed by the sand monster. Because he didn't believe in monsters, his younger comrades made it a joke. When Sayama arrived to the police station, he discovered Jin, who had been arrested after being involved in a brawl. Jin was subsequently released by Sayama when it was discovered that he was battling to defend a man who was being bullied by a gang of thugs. He has known Jin since investigating the death of Goro Kanzaki and advises him to live a better life and avoid getting into conflicts. Jin valued Sayama's interests since it made him happy. Furthermore, he recalls Sayama's statements from when he was a child. The picture then shifts to 3 men menacing their victims, with one of them, Shu, turning the victim into sand. On the other hand, a girl who happened to be passing by saw the occurrence and dashed away from the 3 of them who wanted to kill her. Kishimoto also offered Jin special chewing gum that could trigger the Zet cells in his body, allowing him to become Zet without having to go through the emotional part of the process. Furthermore, when Jin transforms into Zet, he is given special garments that can merge into his body, so he no longer has to worry about his clothes being destroyed. Jin was ready to return home when he ran into Konoha, who was conducting volunteer work with her mother. He angrily chased her away and hurried away from her, knowing that he could no longer compromise her safety by being near him. Even though he is unable to perform many tasks that require him to be in close proximity to ordinary humans, Jin nonetheless assists people by beating up criminals who frequently disturb locals and providing meals to the homeless. Jin arrived home to find the girl being pursued by Shu and his siblings. Jin asked her to leave the house, but she refused, telling him what she had just witnessed. She then asked him to let her stay there for a bit. Jin felt the presence of the players nearby as they were eating. He hurried out and told her she had to stay in the house if she wanted to live. Instead, she had been silently following him. His actions, on the other hand, were being observed by Mitsugai's men via CCTV cameras. They came upon the girl who had been following Jin, lost track of him in an empty region, and instead discovered her bag which she had left behind when she fled from the 3 guys. All of those were traps set up by Shu and his brothers, it turned out. Jin arrived just as Shu was ready to kill the girl and instantly attacked her. It was unavoidable that they would fight. Mitsugai's men, who were watching Jin, then shot the girl with shock shots, knocking her out to conceal Jin's identity as Zet. Shu, seeing Jin was a dangerous opponent, transformed into his true form, a player. When his siblings saw this, they fled the fight since the sweeper would come for the players who broke the rules by changing their form at will. Jin, who had predicted this, bit his gum and transformed into Zet, but with a radically different appearance. Jin can easily defeat the monster thanks to Zet's might. However, he has not been able to return to his human form because the monster's core appears to have escaped. At the same time, the sweeper arrived and swiftly destroyed the monster's core, allowing Jin to return to his human form. However, when the sweeper recognized Jin as Zet, the sweeper meant to eliminate him. But then Seiji appears and stops the sweeper, telling him that their employer will be furious if the sweeper murders Jin. The sweeper then left after hearing this. Jin then inquired about himself and the sweeper with Seiji. Seiji just revealed that he was a member of evil and had been monitoring him for quite some time. He also expressed his desire for Jin to mature and complete his Zet form. Jin wanted to ask more questions, but Mitsugai and his men had already arrived. Mitsugai then tells him about the sweeper and warns him to be cautious. The girl finally awoke the next day and introduced herself as Tanaka. Jin discovers that he has been monitored by Mitsugai the entire time, and he tells Tanaka to leave his residence as quickly as can. In other news, Kuga is transported to a secret Amagi Corporation facility that his father is completely unaware of. Kuga's crew, which formerly assisted him, turns revealed to have built numerous weapons and equipment so that he might accomplish his dream of becoming a justice enforcer like the superhero who became his idol. However, because it did not go as planned, Kuga requested that his team make a few changes to the superhero suit he would wear because he was determined to be like Alphys. He also thanked his team for being attentive of him and working hard to make his dream a reality. Following that, he encounters an elderly guy named Jiru, who claims to be an admirer of his. Kuga rose to fame and was hailed as a hero 2 years ago after rescuing victims trapped in burning buildings. Although he had previously refused to reveal his identity, his father persuaded him to do so since positive exposure could bring the company cash. As a result, he became well-known and had a large following. Jiru then took out his phone and showed Konoha, who had been tossed into the swimming pool and was unable to swim. To see if Kuga truly has a strong sense of justice, Jiru gives him the option of saving his sister or 3 strangers, who are enormous fans of him. Kuga made the decision to save his sister and dashed for the swimming pool, but when he arrived, he met Konoha, who was learning to swim and appeared to be Oak. Elsewhere, because he opted to save his sister, 3 of his biggest followers are forced to die. Jiru is revealed to be a member of Evil, who wishes to exact vengeance on the Amagi family for the atrocities committed on him and the players. Evil's employer, on the other hand, warns Jiru not to attack humans, even if Mitsugai Amage has brought them pain. The following day, Kuga watches a television show on the murder of 3 schoolgirls. Jiru then contacts him and informs him that he has failed the exam because becoming a hero is not as simple as it appears. Meanwhile, Seiji approaches Shu's brothers, Ebizu and Gakuzu, and requests that Jin be killed. He promises them that he will obstruct the sweeper. If Jiru acts freely, Seiji prefers to keep everything hidden in order to avoid drawing the notice of their supervisor and the sweeper. Jin and Tanaka were traveling together when they happened to run into Konoha and her buddy. She then contacted him with the intention of returning the jewelry he had lost in a fire several years before. However, he harshly urged her not to approach him and ran away. Soon later, Jin detected the presence of the players nearby and discovered that Konoha and her buddy had been captured by them. Ebizu then appeared in front of him and revealed his true form as a player, while Gakuzu was in command of Konoha and her companion. Jin had just realized that his gum had been left behind, preventing him from transforming into Zet, and he was completely overwhelmed by Ebizu. Elsewhere, Kuga, who has finally obtained the Alpha's hero suit and equipment, receives a call from Konoha asking for his assistance. Kuga then donned the Alpha's hero suit and dashed to save his sister. Meanwhile, Jin, who was growing desperate, knew Konoha was in danger and chose to save her first. Jin arrived just in time to save Konoha. Gakuzu, who had reverted to his previous form, the cockroach monster, attacked Jin with a swarm of tiny cockroach monsters. When Jin was knocked down by an onslaught from Gakuzu, Kuga arrived and assisted him by slaying Gakuzu and a herd of other monsters. He then advised Kuga to prioritize Konoha's safety and the safety of her companion because she had lost a lot of blood. Kuga nodded in agreement and rushed to fly Konoha and her buddy with the drone that his crew had constructed. On the other hand, other homeless individuals in the region noticed Jin's appearance and wanted to assist him. But he refused and begged them to leave because the vagabonds wouldn't be able to deal with the bloodthirsty swarms of monsters. Jin, who was gravely hurt while attempting to combat the players without using Zet's power, is then stopped by Seiji, who implants a ceramic spike into his heart, allowing him to freely become Zet. Jin was soon transformed into Zet. Even today, he can attain the perfect level, transforming into Red Zet. Mitsugai and his men, who had been watching him through surveillance cameras for a while, were perplexed as to what had happened when Jin suddenly transformed into Zet and attained the perfect level. Jin, on the other hand, sensed the great power that had just been awakened within his body, and he was eager to vanquish the creatures. When he was fighting the player and was about to overtake him, Seiji arrived and told him that he had specifically instructed Ebizu and his siblings to murder him or injure those closest to him. Seiji wanted to see if Jin could achieve the red level Zet, which was the perfect level. Jin is enraged because Seiji has manipulated others to reach his ambitions. However, he easily avoided Jin's attack and left because it wasn't yet time for him to confront Jin. Kuga is fighting Ebizu to the death elsewhere. He appears to be overpowered by Ebizu, a difficult player, while relying exclusively on the Amagi Corporation's superior equipment and modest physical ability. When he was in a hurry, Jin appeared and promptly helped him cope with Ebizu and his shrimp monster minions. Knowing that this was Kuga's first encounter with a swarm of demons, Jin encouraged him to endure and get stronger. When Jin in Zet's form recalls his name, he wonders why Zet knows it. As the struggle became more intense, Ebizu increased his strength and managed to push Jin until he was forced to revert to his normal Zet state. However, Jin eventually vanquished Ebizu and reverted to his human form. Kuga, who witnessed this, appeared astonished because he hadn't expected the monster-like creature who assisted him to be his best friend Jin. On the other hand, Mitsugai, who observed the struggle, appeared shocked that the figure of the Alpha's hero who suddenly came there was his grandson Kuga. Knowing that the Amagi Corporation and his grandfather were implicated, Kuga hurried to Mitsugai and demanded an explanation for what had occurred thus far. Mitsugai was compelled to tell him everything. When Jin returned home, he was astounded to learn that Tanaka had also been attacked by a swarm of cockroaches who were Gakuzu's minions. She did, however, live when Gakuzu was vanquished, and she seemed relieved to be able to meet Jin again. Jin and Kuga came to the hospital a few days later because Konoha had asked them to. Kuga then told Jin that his grandfather had told him everything. Thus, he knew about Jin becoming Zet. A lifelong lover of the animated film Alphas on television, Jin learned that the Red Zet figurine was based on one of the characters made by the Amagi Corporation's animation studio. The character is the strongest hero character capable of defeating demons. Kuga grew to admire Jin and Zet in his body. However, Jin does not appear to believe Zet is all that terrific. After all, he needs to suffer since he cannot live a normal human existence. Nonetheless, Kuga appears to be quite thrilled about it and assures Jin that he will become Alphas and assist him in defeating the players. Kuga even referred to him as a hero named Zetman. When they finally met, Konoha requested them to tell her what truly happened and why the demons attacked him. Jin kept everything hidden because he didn't want Konoha to feel frightened or afraid. Kuga, on the other hand, appears to disagree with his decision because his sister should know what their grandfather has done because Mitsugai has indirectly jeopardized Konoha's safety. Jin decided to let Tanaka live with him for a variety of reasons, allowing people to believe she is his girlfriend. However, Mitsugai, who had cautioned Jin to keep away from humans for their own safety, did not remain silent and instead asked him to stop his contact with her as quickly as possible. Mitsugai then sent Jin to the lab to conduct research on Jin's body until he reached the perfect Zet level. Mitsugai is curious about the source of the sudden alteration in his body and wishes to discover an answer. Kuga was with them this time since he was curious about what happened to Jin. While Kishimoto was examining Jin's body for Zet cells, Mitsugai informed Kuga that the Amaji Corporation was launching an experiment to produce a non-human species called Net. However, Zet was generated as a net side effect owing to a little error in the process. Zet unexpectedly turned out to have attained the perfect stage of the experiment, therefore Mitsugai and Goro named the experimental outcome Zet. Mitsugai aspires to be Zet, the best weapon for crushing the players. Goro, on the other hand, appears to wish to raise Zet as a normal person and live a normal life like humans in general. Nonetheless, Jin tells Kuga that he decided to live as a Zet so that he may defend everyone from monster attacks and bring about global peace. Mitsugai deduced from the sequence of examinations on Jin's body that CG had forcibly awakened the ring of exposures within Jin's body in order for him to achieve perfection, even if only momentarily. Mitsugai had no notion CG knew more about Zet than he did. Jin, for some reason, sensed Goro's presence there and compelled Mitsugai to lead him to where his grandfather was. Mitsugai is also forced to take Jin to Goro's location. How astonished Jin was to discover that all that remained of his grandfather was his head. Mitsugai admits that they can only save Goro's brain and keep him alive in order to understand Zet. Mitsugai then instructs Jin to consult with Guru about what they should do to help him reach the perfect level and keep it there, as he requires that power to protect everyone from monster attacks. However, Jin unplugged one of the connections connecting to Goro's skull, causing him to die. He did it on purpose since he didn't want Goro to suffer so he could rest in peace. Jin seems very sad and disappointed when he hears Goro's final message to him, wondering if he eats frequently. Not only that, but Goro inquired about his red stone, which turned out to be in Konoha. Kuga then contacted his mother to inquire about Konoha's whereabouts and Jin's necklace with a red stone pendant. Unbeknownst to anybody, Jiro has been spying on the Amaji family with insect-sized monsters that can act as eavesdroppers and control anyone in their path. Soon later, several men were seen penetrating Kuga's mother's home. They were presumably commanded by Seiji to get the jewelry and kidnap Konoha. One of them then crept into her room and disguised himself as Jin in order to steal the jewelry from her. At the same time, Jin and the others arrived and planned to steal a necklace, resulting in a battle between them. The intruders later disclosed that they were formed from a sample of Jin's blood. As a result, they can transform into Jin and have some Zet strength. The intruders were not just after Konoha, but also Mitsugai, who was present. Their plan was halted by Kishimoto, who was willing to sacrifice himself to defend Mitsugai. Jin ultimately defeated them all after transforming into Zet. Kuga raced to Konoha's chamber and saw the girl in good health. However, an intruder had managed to escape and steal Jin's necklace, which he returned to Jiro. When they thought the attack was ended, Jiro, who was also participated in the attack together with Seiji, exploded the explosive left in the house by the attackers. Mitsugai, who was hurt in the incident, was sent to the hospital for intensive care. He appeared depressed and distraught because Kishimoto was willing to give out his life for him. He then wonders who their adversary is, who has enough money to develop clones and advanced equipment. When Kuga heard this, he became resolved to get vengeance on those who had threatened Konoha and destroyed his home. When Jin was about to return home, he ran into the evil's boss, who introduced himself as the master. He was going to assault the man when he noticed the sweeper behind him, threatening Jin with his sword. Master informed Jin that he was the first player to revolt against humans who had profited from his exploitation. Master appears to be a pacifist as he apologizes for the event at the Amaji family's home and claims that the perpetrator is none other than Seiji. He claimed that the majority of the players who joined evil were peace-loving like him. They also dislike fighting and are constantly looking for methods to cohabit with humans. However, Seiji disagreed and desired the annihilation of humanity. Master admits that he is powerless to defeat Seiji. As a result, he begged Jin to assist him in defeating Seiji and his group, and Jin accepted. At the same time, Kuga learned that Konoha had vanished. Soon later, Kuga received a phone call from Jiru, who informed him of Konoha's whereabouts. He hastened to inform Jin of Konoha's disappearance, and then went to meet Jiru in the parking lot, where Jiru then requested him to get into his car. Meanwhile, Kuga's squad, which is fitted in with a tracking device, discreetly follows Jiru's automobile to find out where he is. However, one of his team members, a man named Hayami, betrayed them by destroying the primary computer system, preventing them from tracking down Kuga, who had been framed by Jiru. After being sedated, Kuga is transferred to a location where Jiru can monitor his every move via the CCTV cameras installed throughout the room. Jiru then puts him to the test, giving him the option of protecting Konoha or the other girls who are his followers. Jiru then inquired if he'd rather find his sister or save the females first. Jiru, on the other hand, is planning by implanting little monsters in some of the girls there so he may control them and trap Kuga. A dreadful incident occurred there, causing the females to cry and flee in terror. At the same time, a gigantic robot arrived and attacked Kuga. Jiru provided him another option, but this time he chose to face the robot and save the girls. Meanwhile, Konoha was at Akimi's residence and had not been taken by Jiru. At the same time, Seiji held a live broadcast on all national television stations, during which he begged the scattered players to change their original shapes. When they heard this, they were overjoyed and revealed their full form, slaughtering the humans around them. Seiji explains that the monsters are the result of research carried out by selfish and unscrupulous humans seeking to maximize profits and abuse them for pleasure. As a result, the players eventually rebelled and exacted their vengeance on the human race that had used them all along. Meanwhile, Kuga, who is fighting robots, appears to be overpowered because he is unable to use his hero equipment. Despite this, he did not give up and devoted his entire strength to conquering the robot. After he successfully defied the robot, a door leading to the elevator eventually opened. The females hurried towards the elevator, believing it was the only way out of that horrible environment. But it turned out to be a trap, and the girls were finally slaughtered. When Koga saw this, he became annoyed and enraged with Jiru for playing with other people's lives as if they had no value. The sole girl remaining alive, who had been controlled by Jiru the entire time, approached him and took him to Jiru. Jin, who was transformed into Zet, fights and defeats the players individually in the midst of the city. Knowing this, Seiji informed everyone that the monsters and Zet were the result of Amagi Corporation's studies, and he proposed that they blame the Amagi family for the deaths of their family at the hands of the players. Jin returned to his human form in front of a large crowd after defeating the players there. They were likewise enraged and mistook him for one of the players. However, Sayama arrived and swiftly secured Jin so that he did not become the object of the citizens' rage. Returning his attention to Kuga, he finally met Jiru, who introduced him to his son, Ichiru. Ichiru finds out to be the one in charge of the microscopic insect monster that has been wiretapping all along. Jiru disputes Kuga's justice once more, which he believes is nonsense. He then discloses that the player is his son, Ichiru. Jiru discloses to Kuga that he was a scientist who worked with Kuga's father, Shizu, at the Amagi Corporation. Jiru sought to divulge what the Amagi Corporation was doing to the public following the player's uprising incident. Shizu, on the other hand, outlawed it and imprisoned Jiru in the secret facility where the players were produced. Not only did Shizu confine him, but he also kept his ill son with him until Ichiru died not long after. Jiru, who is unwilling to let his son die, makes Ichiru the player so that the boy might live until Seiji arrives to release those trapped there. As a result, Jiru wishes to exact vengeance on Shizu and his family for the pain he has endured thus far. Simultaneously, Shizu conducted a news conference in which he contradicted Seiji's claim that the Amagi Corporation manufactured these creatures. However, Shizu's right-hand guy, who was accompanying him in the press conference, abruptly stood up and stated that all of his comments were genuine and that he would end his own life to prove it. The man was revealed to have been manipulated by Ichiru's insect monster in order to cause chaos. After seeing this on television, an enraged Kuga asked what Jiru's true motivation was for doing all of this. Hayami suddenly appears, revealing that he is Jiru's accomplice and is committed to assist him in exacting revenge on the Amagi family. Kuga pulled out his gun and shot Hayami, Jiru, and Ichiru. After finally escaping, he met his crew, who tracked him down, donned the Alpha's hero suit, and rushed to his father's location. Seiji and his thugs arrived at the news conference site to assassinate Shizu. At the same time, Jin, who had transformed into Zet, arrived and engaged Seiji in battle. He could, however, easily beat Jin and extract the ceramic spike he had previously implanted in Jin's body, instantaneously changing him into a human form. Kuga eventually arrives and kills Seiji's guys. When Koga was going to murder Seiji, his father instructed him to murder Jin instead. Instead, Jin leveled his rifle at Kuga's father, aiming to kill the man who had created all of this trouble. But Jin tries to persuade Kuga that killing Shizu will have no effect. Shizu ordered his soldiers to assault Kuga after receiving a threat from his own son. And furious, Kuga ultimately shoots at his father, but his mother saves him, despite the fact that they both get harmed. Everyone in the room, including Jin, was taken aback by what Kuga had just done. However, a dreadful catastrophe occurred not long after. Seiji turns out to have planted the players, who subsequently transform and attack everyone. The building is then blown up by one of the players, killing numerous people. During the pandemonium, Jin discovers a ceramic spike that can transform him into Zet. Jin told Kuga to murder him if he turned evil for inserting the ceramic spike into his chest. He eventually transformed into Zet and attained the perfect level while retaining his human nature. When Jin achieves the perfect Zet level, the ring of exposures in his body becomes activated. It forces the players in his vicinity, including Seiji and Tanaka, to reveal their true identities. Seiji stated that the players who transformed due to the ring of exposures and not of their own free choosing would not be able to return to their human form. He also disclosed that Tanaka was the player he had used to get close to Jin. He did not, however, expect Jin and Tanaka to fall in love and wish to have a happy family like humans. Tanaka, as a player, reveals a terrifying power that can convert anyone into sand with a single touch. As a result, Kuga murders her, not caring if she was the girl Jin loved. When Jin saw her being murdered in front of him, he became enraged, and Seiji assumed that his purpose of creating him a perfect Zet and despising humans had been accomplished. Seiji and Kuga then fought till he defeated Kuga. Seiji then asked Jin to murder Kuga since Kuga would kill him without hesitation. He did, however, murder Seiji, keep Kuga alive, and flee. 3 years later, Kuga has succeeded his grandfather as CEO of the Amaji Corporation. He is still on a rescue mission as an alpha, safeguarding the locals from the players who are still slaughtering humanity. Kuga, on the other hand, prefers to conceal his identity in order to live a tranquil and peaceful home life with a girl he once saved years ago. Meanwhile, Jin secluded himself from those closest to him and continued to eliminate the players from the shadows in order to defend humanity. This is the end of Zetman. Thank you for watching the content on this channel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest contents. See you in the next video.